So let's talk about the topic of emotional dumping. We're going to talk about in this video what it is and also why it accidentally pushes other people away. And then at the end of this video, if you stick around, I will let you know some really important strategies you can use to change this habit or pattern. So this was actually originally a topic I started discussing like 4 years ago and still get so many questions about this daily. So I figured I'd really just cement everything here together. So I want us to think of emotional dumping as essentially unloading your emotions in a one-sided way without taking the time to properly self-soothe. If we do this from, every time to time, there's really nothing wrong with it. It's completely fine to have a friend or a family member that like, hey, you're having a really tough day and you just need to vent and let it all out. There can be a lot of beauty in that. But it becomes problematic in relationships when one of two things happen, or both things. Number one, we continuously do it. We do it all the time. And in fact, most of our interactions are actually built around emotional dumping. So, for example, maybe you have a friend who comes to you all the time and they constantly like unload and vent and go through all this stuff. Number two thing that can happen is they don't do anything to change the problems or challenges they're facing. So maybe, for example, they are in a relationship where they're really unhappy and they keep venting and unloading and doing this over and over again, but they're not working to, go to counseling or take classes or do something different in the relationship or leave the relationship if it's really, really problematic and unhealthy. And I'll put an honorable number three thing here, which is also if you have a friend who constantly does this with you, but you don't do it back with a friend, or there's sort of like this one-sided connection where maybe, the person who's constantly emotionally dumping doesn't properly see the person they're doing this with, how it can affect them over time, and may not even ask questions about that person enough to make them feel like there's this really two-way relationship being built. So these are the places where it becomes problematic. And I want you to just ask yourself, if you're watching this video, you may be on the receiving side of emotional dumping from time to time. Maybe you're the person who feels like you might be doing the emotional dumping, and that's perfectly okay. It's really just a symptom of like unprocessed pain in the past that you're in learned helplessness and don't know how to deal with. And this is what this video is going to help you get out of. But I want you to ask yourself, whether it's you or if this is a friend of yours, try to score it from 1 to 10. Like, how strong is this pattern? And you can really score it through looking at like how frequently do you do this in particular relationships, and how long does it go on, or how much is there a lack of being able to like really consider the other person and hear them out as well. Now, underneath this, there's actually really powerful information that emotional dumping is giving to you, and it's that you are not taking the time to properly soothe yourself and you're feeling learned helplessness in terms of trying to solve the problem. And so when you see, these different dynamics happening, we can actually unpack that there are generally really powerful unmet needs that are taking place. So the emotional dumper, okay, does this thing essentially where they will often, through the idea of emotional dumping, through like letting everything out onto somebody, it actually meets specific needs that are generally really deeply unmet needs this person has from childhood. And these needs can include things like to be seen, to be heard, to feel important, to feel like they matter, or to feel significant. And so when they have this pain that they're sharing with somebody, they feel seen and heard, they feel understood. And they usually use emotional dumping, believe it or not, as a subconscious strategy for emotional connection. If we take it a step further, what I've actually found is often the person doing the emotional dumping doesn't feel super equipped to connect outside of the emotional dumping. So they may not know what else to talk about, or may just not be much of a comfort zone to talk about other things too much. And so they have this like comfortable way of like, okay, when I'm in pain and I share it or I vent, this is my way of getting to know other people because I'm sharing something vulnerable. And so that vulnerability is connecting us. But again, if you are not able to self-soothe in the process, or if you're not doing anything to change the dynamic that you're emotionally dumping about, this is where it can become problematic. So we have to do a few crucial things here. Number one, you have to learn to self-soothe. I'm not going to go into a huge dynamic right now, but I'm going to give you one really powerful tool. And you can actually find this tool, by the way, in depth in a course, which is probably my favorite course at PDS, called the Emotional Mastery and Belief Reprogramming course. And it actually helps you master your emotions, master self-soothing. And you can check that out for free for 7 days using the link down below. Now, this tool, and this is just a very high level version of this tool, is when you feel bad, okay, when you feel negative emotion, I want you to ask yourself, what emotion do I feel? Where do I feel it in my body? And what do I need in order to create relief for myself? Okay. And I want you to write out all the different things you come up with. And then I want you to pick the healthiest one possible. Okay. So let's say you're in an argument. Maybe you feel like your partner doesn't understand you. And maybe this is like a theme or a pain point. So, okay, what am I feeling? I'm feeling frustrated. Where do I feel it in my body? I feel it like knots in my stomach and a tensing of my shoulders and back and chest. And what the first two steps purpose is to actually get you in your body, which actually gets you present with yourself. And then, okay, what are all the things I could do to create relief? I could talk to my partner in a different way. I could communicate my needs to my partner. I could try to communicate more clearly. I could ask my partner to go to counseling. I could take a course about communication with my partner. I could, and you can put all these things out. Some of them are not going to be so healthy. You're going to be like, I could yell at my partner, but dump them all out and then pick the healthiest one. And then your goal is to actually start actioning this out. And it's a very simple tool. It's a very simplified tool, but it really will help you look at this dynamic and be like, okay, there's actually things I can do. And it will also make you feel like the power's back in your hands. So that's really valuable to sort of start that process. Now, the other thing you can do, so that's your actual, first step to self-soothe and to try to solve the problem. Those two things that we see that the person wasn't doing, is you can also make an effort to just be mindful if you're the person doing the emotional dumping about communicating and asking the person you're speaking to more questions about themselves as well. So that person who's the emotional dumpee or being dumped on can see that you're trying to invest in this two-way connection. And this is really the cherry on top here. You can start communicating about what you're going to try to do differently. And that will take the person on the receiving end of emotional dumping out of this state of learned helplessness where they're going to feel like, oh my gosh, you always talk about this, but I try to give you all this advice and I pour my heart out and you don't want to take anything away from it or you don't do anything differently. And that person can often feel defeated and pull away or just like not know what to do, kind of feel helpless or drained. But if you're like, hey, this is the problem, but here's what I'm trying to do about it. And here's my strategy for this week that I'm practicing, and you communicate that makes the other person feel like, okay, like this is more of a productive conversation instead of a destructive conversation. And it takes some of that pressure and helplessness or defeat off of the other person as well. And then if you pair that with also communicating to that person and being like, how's XYZ going in your life? How's your relationship? How's your job going? And you're making sure you ask intentional questions. And then you can even bring that conversation in like, well, what are you working to improve? What are you doing differently? This is going to change the conversation. So you can still get those needs met to be seen, to be heard, but you're also seeing and hearing yourself. You're trying to solve the problem yourself. It helps you think differently about the situation. It helps you not push people away and still stay connected to people in conversation because it is a two-way street. And it also puts the conversations into a state of productivity rather than a state of destruction. So hopefully this makes a whole lot of sense. If you want to do a much deeper dive, you can check out the emotional mastery course that I was mentioning for free for 7 days down below. I put the link. And also if you want to take a free attachment style test to just check how securely attached you are and to monitor your progress, that free quiz is there. It helps give you everything broken down by percentages. And it gives you a free report so you can just sort of stay up to date with everything that's going on for you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this channel or this video, please consider hitting the like button. And I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's video as well.